So a huge story today. Ismail Mayo Zambada, one of the biggest ever drug traffickers in the world, has pled guilty on multiple conspiracy to traffic drugs and drug trafficking charges. This has got big implications for Mexican politicians, the war on drugs, and what's happening in Mexico right now. So first of all, I'm going to say what happened in the courtroom today, and then second, what are some of these implications, particularly in terms of this big question of will El Mayo testify against Mexican politicians, and then third, about what are the implications on the ground in Sinaloa. So what happened in the court, first of all? So this was in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn. It's a big federal court that has become the epicenter for narco trafficking cases recently. It was in this court in 2018 to 2019. You had the trial of El Chapo. It was in this court in 2023. You had the trial of General Garcia Luna, who was a former Mexican Minister of Public Security, who himself was convicted of working with the cartel. And then it was in this trial today that Ismail Mayo Zambada came and pled guilty. So about 12:34 p.m. New York time, he made this historic plea. And he used these words: "I created a criminal network that I led called the Sinaloa cartel. The organization that I led promoted corruption in my home country by paying off police, military commanders and politicians that allowed us to operate freely. It goes back to the very beginning when I was a young man starting, and it continued for all those years." So we're talking here about the immense amount of corruption and his long time in trafficking. He went on to say, "I take responsibility for all of it, and I apologize for everyone affected by my actions." Now, Mayo Zambada is 75 years old. It's the most likely, though you see many reports saying that he's 77. His lawyer confirmed to me that he was born on January the 30th, 1950. And he said that he began in 1969 trafficking drugs when he was 19 years old, trafficking marijuana. And so he had a total of 55 years trafficking drugs. So again, he could really be the biggest drug trafficker in terms of prolific, in terms of moving dope, even than El Chapo, although El Chapo is more infamous. And you had all of these, him appearing in all of these movies and TV series, and this interview with Sean Penn. El Mayo could actually have been the more prolific trafficker. He said he began moving cocaine in 1980, and he said he moved the incredible amount of 1.5 million kilos of cocaine. That's 1.5 thousand tons of cocaine. That is an extraordinary, huge amount. Now, this might not just be him moving the cocaine, but his organization, his network of drug traffickers, this is the Sinaloa cartel. But this really is a vast amount. And he, in the court, he said he would accept life imprisonment. Now, he's already 75 years old, so it means he would likely die behind bars, and that he would accept asset seizures of up to $15 billion. Now, although he says he accepts these asset seizures of $15 billion, it still means that the US government has to find this money. Now, he could try and help them find that money to try and alleviate his case somewhat. He will still have a sentencing hearing in January 2026 is when it's scheduled, although the death penalty has definitely been taken off the table. Now, what are the implications of this? So first of all, this big question, there's really a lot of speculation about within Mexican media especially, will he testify against Mexican politicians? And people are saying, oh, he's bound to, he's cooperating now. And this comes at a time when the administration of Donald J. Trump in the White House are making angry noises about the Mexican government working with drug traffickers. They're even threatening unilateral military action against cartel targets in Mexico. So you have this big question: would he talk about governors, even former presidents, current presidents? Anything could be on the table. However, his lawyer, Frank Perez, his lawyer said, this is not the case. And he said, no, he's not going to give any names. Whatever Mayo Zambada knows will stay with Mayo Zambada. That's what he said when he was coming out of the court being heckled by a group of journalists. And I think, personally, this idea of him testifying against Mexican politicians seems quite unlikely at this stage. For him to actually go into court and to take the stand and to testify against Mexican politicians, one thing is he's already going to die in prison. Now you could say he wants better conditions. El Chapo is being held in the Supermax in Colorado, where you are in the desert, being in isolation for 23 hours a day. They're really painful conditions. He could want better conditions than that, but he could also do things like help with these asset seizures, help with money, not with the whole 15 billion, but in other cases, historic cases of drug traffickers. You've seen like Osiel Cardenas help with $50 million in recovering in asset seizures. So we could help with recovering money rather than having to take the stand against politicians to alleviate his condition. The other thing is that he has family still in Mexico that could be in danger if he were to testify. So there's reasons against that, but we will see, and time will tell about this. Another big implication of this trial is it vindicates the way that El Mayo was taken to the United States. Now, he wasn't taken in a regular arrest and extradition process, but he was kidnapped in Mexico. From all the evidence we have and what he says, he was kidnapped in Mexico on July 25th, 2024. He was lured to a meeting in a luxury house in Culiacan, which is the state capital of Sinaloa, lured to a luxury house to meet supposedly the governor of Sinaloa and members of the Chapitos, who were the sons of El Chapo and the other main faction in the Sinaloa cartel. He was lured to meet them there, but then he was beaten. He was taken against his will onto an aeroplane and flown to an airfield in New Mexico, where he was handed into federal custody. Also on board that plane was Joaquin Guzman Jr., one of the sons of El Chapo. He was taken then. He is still in federal proceedings and likely is going to cooperate, the same as his brother Ovidio Guzman has cooperated and is testifying against other people. So what else is happening now in Sinaloa from this? Well, and Mayo Zambada, although he was perhaps the biggest drug trafficker that's ever come out of Mexico, had a reputation of being this benevolent godfather type figure who was less violent than some other players. There's another podcast you can see on Crash Out, an interview with Margarito Flores, a big drug trafficker in Chicago, where he said of El Mayo, he was a fierce man, but he was also one of the fairest. And you hear that from many people. However, while he might have had this reputation of being this benevolent godfather who was not really so violent, the Sinaloa cartel that he was, a top leader in, was really involved in major violence. And you saw these various wars in Tijuana, in Ciudad Juarez, in Durango, with hit squads from the Sinaloa cartel carrying out these massacres, having these mass graves. So you can't really separate him from all of that violence. Now, after the kidnapping on September 9th, 2024, this civil war erupted in the Sinaloa cartel, in which El Mayo's son, known as El Mayito Flaco, went to war with the remaining Chapitos, who are Iván Archibaldo and Jesus Alfredo, and this war has been tearing Sinaloa apart. You can see a separate video I have about that war. Now we're going up to 1 year anniversary and that war continues. We're into thousands of deaths and disappearances. So you can see, though El Mayo had this reputation for being this benevolent godfather figure, these wars, the Sinaloa cartel was involved, and these wars around it continue while he is likely to die in a prison cell in the United States. Being a narco journalist is a lot of blood and sweat and beers. So if you want to keep these videos coming, then you can support this for completely free by subscribing on whatever platform you're watching this on, and you can go to www.crashoutmedia.com, where you're going to see all kinds of news and analysis and reports and be the best informed in the room about the drug war. And if you want to support this, then you can for just $5 a month, the price of a cup of coffee.